pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I understand we have an addition to the agenda.
Yes, we'll be adding insurance rates to action items as G.2.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with the amendment?
So moved.
And I'll second it. Mr. Roberts?
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes. Motion carries. Next in our meeting, we will get into our presentations. First up is our presentation for the district state report card from our Department of Teaching and Learning.
It takes into account the performance of all students across the district. Our state report card only takes into account grades 3 through the high school, but Indian Trail doesn't get out of this either. We use the performance index that they're building with our local resources of NWA MAP and iReady. So we generate that same thing for the Indian Trail building. So performance index is built into the achievement piece here. And what I have clicked on is our performance index last school year was 86.2. If I scroll down, you can see where we've been over from 2020 through 2024, and you're thinking, well, how can we have a performance index for 2020 when things were shut down? We did give a state exam for the fall third grade, and we gave the state exam for our December end of course exams for the high school. So that's why there's a performance index generated. So you can see last school year, we did not meet our 0.5 gain expectation. We were down a little bit. I received an email today from another resource I use, and over 50% of the districts across Ohio did not grow this year in their performance index. Why? Great question. I don't know. The piece of this is that while we're looking at performance index, I've been meeting with every tested subject so far. I've met with entire group at Winchester Trail, the math group at the middle school, and I'm scheduled to start meeting with the rest of the middle school and the high school over the next 2 weeks. So our performance index last year was 86.2. Now, Why it says 78.9, that is the rating on the report card, which gives us our 3 stars. The maximum district performance index is the top 2% of the state of Ohio. So that's the top 2% of all districts in the state of Ohio, what their performance index came out to be. That grew just a little bit last year, but it's stayed pretty consistent right around that. It started in 108s, now it's right around the low 109s. And then if you go into the building performance index, they get another rating for every building in the state of Ohio. So I would like to say if we have a report card, it should be a constant and a static measure, but it's not. It will change year to year. The other piece that is driven by the performance index is our gap closing. As a district, we were a 4, and the gap closing takes into account all subgroups, every ethnicity, any identified population that we have in the district. And it starts with English language arts and math achievement. So we had 9 groups that counted that, and you see we earned 7. 7 out of our 9 hit their target. The target is established by the state of Ohio, and I will show you that as I scroll on down here. Then there's a way to earn points for growth. That is the value add piece of making a year's worth of growth. However, on the gap analysis, they require a 2-point gain. Not just growth, but be a +2 above the growth line. Then we have graduation, which we do very, very well with, and we have our English learners. This is solely based on their separate exam of the OELPA, the Ohio English Language Proficiency Assessment. So those students that measures there if they exit the program by being proficient or if they improve year over year. And then we have chronic absenteeism, which we spent some time on as a district talking about this year. Our goal for this school year is 16.4%, and that means a student cannot be absent more than 10% of the instructional time during the school year. That's both excused and unexcused absences. So it's a combination of all that. And then we have the gifted performance indicator, which is gifted progress, which is the value add, which means our gifted population made a year's worth of growth. Our gifted performance index, which we did not get points for, that is a separate mark of all gifted students in the state of Ohio, and there's a calculation that the top 2% gets that score. They divide it out. We were shy by 1% on that. And then we have identification and services for points. This doesn't mean we're not servicing our kids. This just means, like, one of the unique things with us is that we identify kids 3 times a year, so in grades 2 through high school, or 2 through 8, and when they get identified, they're not automatically served. So those students that we would pick up during the school year, if it's a dozen of them, they would count as not being served. So that's why that's where we struggle on that, but we've got a plan together, and our staff is going through some PD so we can start earning that credit during the school year. As I scroll down, here's where it shows all the groups. The red dots are the state expectation for each subgroup. And so in ELA, we missed our identified population of students with disabilities, and we also missed the Asian and Pacific Islanders. Every other group of students, we hit the target. In mathematics, which is on the right side, it's the same 2 again, the Asian and Pacific Islanders, and we were just under with our students with disabilities with their performance last school year on the state exams. That is the achievement piece. Now, if you're still on the board in years 20, 30, 31, that green line up there will be required to be 100%, where 100% of the students will have to be hitting proficiency. So each one of these targets grow year after year. So once again, it's not a static report card. We have to analyze what we're doing, reflect on our practice, refine our instructional practices to keep up with where we're moving with the state expectations. Down below is the value add growth piece of our students. In mathematics, all students, we got a point for all students. Our Black African American population, our economically disadvantaged population, and our multiracial population all were exceeded. So we got 4 extra points there, 4 out of 9. And on the ELS side, we got 0 out of 9. And as I keep scrolling down and this is all based on performance index, then we have our graduation rates, which we are exceeding the state bar there. There's our English learners for the goal. Next year's goal for our English learners goes up to 53, I believe. So that 53% of our population has to show progress on the OLPA exam. That's on top of the OST exam that they're already figured into. So the reason in the CW Promise why we chose the performance index, because it takes into account every single kid in our district. It's the performance of all kids. The one other thing, I know I shared this with you last year, but I want to show you this real quick. The graduation rate, we're a 5-star. I remember last year when I shared this with you, I think you guys were a little surprised, but now this is a year in arrears, so this does not mean last year's graduating class. This is the 2023 cohort. 72% of those students were with us for 4 years. I mean, so that we have students coming in and out of district on a regular basis. The cohort before, we were down to 67.3%. So that had me thinking, we have the local resource of NWA MAP that we give to our ELA kiddos all the way through. So I went to grade 3. That means they were here in kindergarten. So only 61% of the students that are in 3rd grade right now were here with us in kindergarten. That percentage should go up because we now have all day, every day kindergarten. 4th grade is 70.3. So 61 is the lowest, and the highest is actually in 8th grade. We're at 75.8% of the students that's been here for 4 years. So there's some mobility in and out of the district. So if you think about that, it's not like we're growing 30 kids a year. It's that we have possibly 30 leaving, 33 coming in for a +3 in a grade level. But that's been very consistent here, and it caused me to go look at other districts. And so, for example, Pickerington, a much bigger district, but they're right there with us at 72.5% of their kids have been there for 4 years. So it's just a change of kids coming and going, and a lot of times they come back. By having that MAP resource, it's amazing to see how many kids join us for a couple years, leave, and then come back. But we have that MAP data point that shows that. So I know this was an incredibly fast piece, and I jumped over even the whole report card, but we're a 4-star in achievement, 4-star in value add, which is progress. The gap closing I shared with you. I shared with the graduation information, the early literacy, this piece, just to, if I can find it real quick, that just shows the percent of students that completed all previous grades in the same district. We're at 63 for that group. Now that should grow with kindergarten be all day, every day. But all those percentages that I kind of threw out there of the amount of students that's with us for a consistent amount of time just shows the incredible effort that our staff and our building admin do for our kids on a daily basis, because we have wonderful results each and every year. And as the expectation grows, the challenge keeps growing for our staff each and every day. So, do you have any questions?
I think it's important to point out, if you can go back to the grade level data.
The gap analysis?
And to be able to point out where an end of a strand, where a strand ends and where a new one begins. Otherwise, if you just looked at the numbers, you would think that, boy, our 6th grade teachers are terrible. And that's not the case, because that's a brand new strand. Just explain that a little bit.
So the standards were kind of a K1, a 2.5, and then we jump to the 6 in the secondary. It builds up through that way. We see it in MAP, our local resources, jumping to that new strand, because it becomes just a new challenge for the students. The expectation goes up. The level of text complexity goes up even higher. So you're at the end of one standard strand or standard group at the 5th grade. Now you're at the bottom of the next. So there's all that room to go. And that's part of the process there with that. We see it, I will say, at Indian Trail, even though it's not part of the report card, they have a huge change going from 1st to 2nd. We give our students the ability to listen to the assessments. 2nd grade, it becomes an independent matter. So then the achievement drops, but it's amazing to see what those students do all through second grade. And we saw this year when they came back in third grade at Winchester Trail how much stronger they kept all the information at the end of second grade moving to third. So that was wonderful to see. Okay. Yep. Anything else? And if you have any questions, any other time, shoot me an email, reach out to me, gladly explain to you. I can go over what I talk with the staff with and try to put it into a digestible amount of information that they can use and assist us along the way.
So thank you for this presentation. I know you addressed it about the performance index.
Yes.
Going from, I think, 86% to 78.
Yes.
But the performance index, it takes into consideration all of the categories and all of the district students. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's every performance category from advanced all the way down to limited. Even if students do not test, sometimes we don't get a credit for that, but that comes out in the participation. They can give us a demotion, but that's never happened here, except when the rules were changed for COVID, or we would have. So yeah, it's just all kids, grades 3, every tested subject. So that would include science, math, ELA, and all 6 of the EOCs at the high school.
So even though I know a lot is considered, do you have like a targeted strategy as far as how to improve that performance index?
The performance index, so if I scroll down here to the calculation piece, this is how the performance index is calculated here. So it's the percentage of students that achieve in each performance area, and they're given that weight. So if I'm looking at the limited, 18.1% of our kids were in limited, and they got a weight of 0.3. If we would move 2 percentage points of those students to basic, we would get 0.3 of a point higher for their weight. So it's really increasing achievement, but also maintaining the current achievement of all kids. Because you don't want to have an advanced student go from advanced down to basic. So it takes into account the achievement of every single kid, what they're expected to do, and then also how can we either maintain or improve their achievement.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, can you scroll up real quick?
Yes.
So as it relates to the CW promise.
Yes.
And the 0.5% increase we're trying to get achieved each year, is that the performance index score or is it the performance index percent?
Great question.
Which is
It
it?
would be the performance index score.
Okay,
So we would hope to get an 86.7 next year.
okay,
Yes.
okay, got it, thank you.
And the reason why is because the 109.3 could change.
Right.
So we're not really measuring an outcome
Okay.
for us.
Okay,
Okay.
All right.
Right,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Mr. Whitlock. Our next presentation, we will hear from SHP regarding the master facilities planning.
So, help me out. Where do I go? There you go. Yep. Perfect. Fantastic. Good evening. Thanks again for allowing us to come and present. It's been a fun process that I want to share with you tonight, and just to help everyone understand sort of where we are in working through this sort of limited master planning process that we've started. What I want to do tonight is I'm going to share with you a presentation that is basically what we gave the community advisory team, which we just met with about a week ago, and we'll walk through that and show you sort of the next steps of the process. No board action tonight. Our goal ultimately is to come back to the board in November with recommendations from the community advisory team. That's perfect, Nick. That's awesome. And so what I'd like to do is I'll walk you through the slide presentation. I know each of you have it there. If at any point in time, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. And I'll ultimately, hopefully I'll get to answer your questions if there are any. What we did is, as part of the presentation at the community advisory team meeting, this is one of those opportunities where we put together a community advisory team and ask for members of your community to be a part of a process in helping make decisions. And I've said this to each of your teams, that ultimately I try to put myself in the shoes of the board members. There's 5 of you, and you need to make good decisions, financially responsible decisions for the district. And I always want to make sure that anything that we're bringing to you has your community has had a chance to provide input and to help us, right, and ultimately making these types of decisions. It's also a great opportunity, again, for when Kaya's in front of a group of folks that we don't normally have a chance to sort of get sort of pulls together. And so the way that we typically start these is I always like to allow the superintendent to talk about all the great things that are going on in the district. Some of these folks don't attend board meetings. They might not make it into the buildings as often, depending on where their kids are. It was also a great opportunity to bring in City Canal Winchester. So Lucas Hare, your development director, was able to come in and talk a little bit about what's happening in the district in the city of Canal Winchester as far as what development is expected. And then from there, we led the group through a series of exercises, talked a bit about the process, and then just kind of worked our way through. And so, yep, if we can get the next slide. Thanks, Nick. And so Kaya spent a little bit of time just talking about some of the great things, again, that have been happening. This ability for districts to apply and get free meals for the kids is just fantastic. She also talked, obviously, about the completed project at Indian Trail. We talked about a couple of the other items here that you see listed, and if you click to the next slide. And then ultimately, she spent some time, obviously, talking about the strategic plan, and then talked a bit about the fact that you as a district really haven't gone to your community for money, at least since 2009, and that just financially the district's in a very good place. Then next up, we had Lucas come in and talk to us about what, sort of from a development standpoint, what's happening. So next slide, Nick. And I can advance these. Can I just click on them? If I just hit them? Will they... No, evidently not. That's all right. So Lucas spent just a few minutes just talking about some of the developments in the district. The fact that right now there are a couple of small developments that are still currently under construction, and then there are some larger developments that are happening north of 33 that ultimately are going to get annexed into the city. And so the message there, and the reason that we felt it was important to have Lucas come in, is, there's a perception right now that all of Central Ohio is growing and that it's all growing exponentially. And that's not really the case. That's not really what we're seeing. We're working with a number of your neighbors, and each of the districts is experiencing growth in a different way. Some have seen very quick, sort of immediate growth that's happened within the last 5 years, whereas you're a district that experienced that growth back in the early 2000s, right? And so that building that took place then and then has sort of trickled as it's, as we've gotten to today, has impacted you. You've seen that student impact. And so now the stuff that you're seeing is probably not going to be something that really makes a significant change to your enrollment over the next 10 years, let's say. Because let's say that a new development goes in and it's 1,000 homes, right? For starters, we don't see 1,000 kids from 1,000 homes, right? And the other thing that happens is that it typically takes anywhere from, let's say, 5 to 7 years for that development to get fully flushed out, for people to buy in, for them to have kids, and then for you to see kindergartners, right? And so ultimately, when we talk about these kinds of master plans and we're sort of projecting out 10 years, we're just not going to see that impact in that 10-year period. It might be at the very tail end if something were to happen tomorrow and a new development were to come online. And so it was important that we hear from the city what they're anticipating, right, what they're expecting, so that we could sort of put that in context as to what we're ultimately doing with this master planning process. And so next slide. And so what we did is we did a very quick introduction of SHP, let everybody understand, obviously, that we as an architecture firm have had a great relationship with your district. We've been working with you for 20 plus years. We talked a bit about the projects that we had been involved in, the ones that we hadn't. And that ultimately, this is a passion of ours. We love working with K-12 clients to help you guys make good decisions. And then the next slide, we focus on what we call the 3 sort of major pillars of master planning, that we feel like if we're not successful in these 3 areas, that we don't have a successful master plan. So I always use the analogy of a stool. If we've got a stool with 3 legs and one of the legs is short, the stool's not going to stand up, right? Same thing for a master plan. If we aren't comfortable in feeling like we've hit educationally fantastic, being financially responsible, and then this last piece of being community developed and supported, we feel like we're just not being successful. And so that's why we use the process we do. Next slide. We talked about the way that we put the process together. So ultimately, it's about establishing the teams. And then we held a series of focus groups and really to ask those groups to help us develop this list of wants and needs. We then worked with this community advisory team that we just met with to prioritize those wants and needs. And I do feel like there's going to be a second round of meeting with that group to really talk about testing some options and some concepts. I think we have a good roadmap, and I'll explain that to you tonight. But there's still work that needs to be done, and definitely some things that need to be refined. And that's ultimately so that we can come back to the board in November. You can see here the different teams that we've been working with. Obviously, we've got 2 board members that are part of the district steering team. We were able to bring another board member in for community advisory, and I appreciate everyone's ability to make those meetings. That middle section in the gray, that was our focus groups. That was pulling the focus groups together and meeting with those teams, and I'll show you who we met with. And then if you go to the next slide, the process that we're using, you'll see down at the bottom, you've got the stakeholder meetings that we held back in September. We then met with the community advisory team. You see how that sort of line indicates information kind of moving up to that team. Met with community advisory, and now we're bringing this information to present to the board. We did give ourselves the ability to go through one more loop, right? So in the month at the end of the month of October and the beginning of the month of November, we have the opportunity to go back to our stakeholders, ask them some more pointed questions about the things that we heard from them. And then we gave ourselves a placeholder for the possibility of getting back together with community advisory team, which I do think we need to do before we can make our final presentation to you. And here are the dates for all that. You can see how that all sort of unfolded as far as the meetings that we've had and that we're intending to have. So next up on this list would be, if you can go back just for a second, next up will be October 23rd. We are intending to have a community presentation, which will just be an open presentation for anyone that wants to attend. And then we will meet with the community advisory team again on November 13th, and then meet back to see you guys at your November 18th board meeting. As far as the focus groups, we met with 20 different groups. It was fantastic. Kaya did a really great job, her and her staff, of putting together a very diverse set of groups for us. I think there was a perception that we needed some performing arts improvements and that we potentially needed some athletics improvements, right? And so what was interesting is that Kaya put these groups together, and you'll notice that we met with 6 student groups. Those were all sort of high school level students. And what was interesting is that Kaya had folks that were there to talk to us about athletics and folks that were there to talk to us about performing arts. And then what we found is that all the kids are doing, they're all doing it, right? They're doing athletics and performing arts. There's not just a group of kids that really represent one portion of the district or one piece of that. They all have some piece that they're in choir and they're running track, or they're playing volleyball and they're in the band. It's all those kinds of different mixes. And so one of the groups that we met with, we were supposed to be there focused on, really talking about athletics and the student life. And we got off into talking about performing arts and a new performing arts center and all those things, and spent most of our time there. So it was a lot of fun. But you can see all the different groups that we met with. Obviously, Adam was able to attend with the Joint Rec District. Had a really great conversation with them to try and understand their needs, what the future looks like for the district and the rec together. So just a great group, and we really got some really strong feedback. If you go to the next slide. So what I tried to do with the community advisory team is sort of summarize the things that we heard. We didn't go into every nuance of every conversation that we had. What we really were looking for, hey, these are the things that we have agreement on. These were all the things that we heard from folks, and they said that we're all in agreement to a T. There were very few instances where the groups didn't have some sort of agreement on these 4 items. And one of the things that we asked the groups about, and I think this is an important slide, we were trying to understand how previous improvements in the district had been communicated out to the community. And so we asked these questions of every one of the groups. And to a T, we heard from everyone that the addition on Indian Trail, everybody understood what that was for, right? That was to get preschool and kindergarten together, and that addition was necessary, and everybody understood it, and it was fully, sort of appreciated for that. It was less clear when we started asking about the additions to the high school, what the goal was behind that project, what we were trying to achieve behind that project. And it doesn't mean that it was an unsuccessful project necessarily. It just means that the way we communicated it maybe didn't quite get the message out to the community or even out to the students. Even the students that are there at the high school were sort of confused as to what the actual goal was of that specific project. And so the reason that we thought that was very important is we're talking about the possibility of undertaking additional improvements. We need to make sure that when we message the community that we're explaining exactly why we're doing that, what their money is going towards, how we're funding them, just overall, just keeping that positive message on exactly how we intend to move forward. There was agreement across the board that a new performing arts center is needed. Okay, I don't think that we heard from anybody that didn't appreciate that need. We also heard that there is a perception, and this was in many of the groups, that more money in the district over the last 5 to 10 years has been devoted to athletics and to the academics than to performing arts. So they felt like the performing arts group has sort of lagged behind as far as our focus, as far as the dollars that have been spent. And then ultimately, we had agreement across the board that there just aren't enough fields and there aren't enough courts to be able to support all the things that we want to do from a middle school, high school, sports standpoint, and then from the joint rec, right? We just can't make all these things work as we're currently configured. So the next slide, what we talked to each of the groups about, I tried to challenge each of the groups about what constitutes balance. How do we get to balance? What does that look like? How would we balance the athletic improvements that we're considering, the performing arts improvements that we're considering, and then also if there are academic needs, how do we get those things into balance so that we feel like everyone is consistently seeing some improvement, and ultimately that we feel like it's sort of it's all justified and balanced together. And I would say we didn't quite get there. We didn't quite hear exactly how to get to that. But ultimately, I feel like we at least have some ideas and we have some things that we can ask some questions about as we proceed forward in the process. And so next slide. And so I think, can we slide up a little bit? I feel like, yep, you got it. So one of the first things that we did a quick exercise about community values. And if you go to the next slide, I asked everybody just a series of these five topics. Of what we felt was most important. We had each of the individuals in the room, and I think we had probably about 30 folks. We had everybody kind of vote, right? What of these were most important? Safety and security always comes up at the very top of the list. It's either one or two almost in everything that we consider. Number two was number of students impacted came in second, and it was actually even with providing future flexibility. And I thought those were very important, and it was interesting to have conversation about those as well. Next up was improving the district's competitive advantage, and we talked about the fact that could mean a lot of different things, not only athletically, but from a performing arts standpoint, or even from just staff retention. How do we retain students and staff? And then the last thing, obviously, this concept of balance between each of the different groups, and that one came in just a distant fifth. We then broke everybody up into teams. We tried to get good representation of both staff and community members into each of the teams, and then we ran through these exercises. And so the next slide, we gave everybody basically 11 different concepts, improvement concepts, and said, here, what we need you to do is, number one is this a want or a need, right? So a new performing arts center, is that a want or a need? What do we believe? Because that has different weight, right? Something that's a need has a stronger weight in my mind than something that is a want. And then next, we asked everybody to kind of rank whether or not they achieved any of these community values that we asked them to ultimately put together. And then I just provided enough information for everybody to kind of get a flavor of what we're talking about. Again, when we're in master planning, we're not designing. So I'm not designing a new performing arts center tonight or with that group. What I'm doing is I'm asking them, where does this rank overall in this overall process? We believe we know some of the things that we thought would be at the top of the list, but it was great to be able to sort of see that result. So we asked everybody to rank each of the things. Then we asked everybody to prioritize. And Nick, if you go to the next slide. So this is just pictures of everybody doing the work in the room and prioritizing. And then we had 5 groups basically that we broke up, and you can see the results of each of the 5. And then I've got them summarized in the slides to follow. I'm not going to go through each one of these. I've got a summary slide of all 11 improvements. But it was very interesting as we looked across all 5 of the groups. The top 3 in the needs category were always the same. They were always the same. They might have been just a slightly different order, but they were always the same. And so, Nick, if you click through just through those next 2, 3, 4, and you guys can take a look at these and each one of how each one of the groups kind of saw this, but keep clicking, and then we'll get to the summary slide. And so basically what we did is we looked at all the wants, we looked at all the needs, then we looked at all the wants and gave them a numeric scale, basically. There were 11 improvements, and so if you came in number 1 on the needs side, you got 11 points. If you came in number 2, you got 10, and so on and so forth. And so you can see the scoring for everything, and ultimately what you see as far as the priorities are concerned is that number 1 was a new performing arts center. I don't think it's a surprise. Number 2 was a field house. Number 3 were additions to the middle school, and those additions included academic space and athletic space. So we were talking about new locker rooms, and then also new classroom, flexible classroom space and storage. That was the description. Next up was improvements to Indian Trail, Winchester Trail campus circulation. And so again, we talked about what that might entail, right? The possibility of an additional out to the main road. We talked about the possibility of reconfiguring bus lots and parking lots in order to try and get back to a little bit better functioning site as far as what that might look like. Next up was improvements to the middle school stadium. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. We then floated out some other things that we heard from the focus groups. Again, all of these are coming from the focus groups, but specifically a new turf practice field at the high school. Next up was relocating the varsity baseball field at the high school and get it into the correct orientation. Next up were grass field improvements at the high school. So this would be going in and effectively redressing every one of the fields. All of our baseball fields, softball fields, all of our practice grass fields, just going in and doing whatever needs to be done to improve those fields, whether it's rolling them, adding additional dirt, overseeding, whatever improvement that might entail. Next up was sound insulation improvements at both the middle school and the high school. This was adding sound panels and doing some other improvements to try and get more practice space. Next up was a new grass soccer field at the high school. And then the last one was about updating finishes and furniture at Indian Trail and at Winchester Trail. Now, one quick thing about these 11 improvements. These aren't all the improvements we heard from the focus groups. There are 100 more that were probably just not of a significant enough nature to kind of rise to the level of these improvements. And by that I mean everything on this list was $100,000 or more, right? If we heard, hey, we'd really like to do this $10,000 thing, it's on our list, but it's just not making it to this priority list because ultimately that's something that could potentially be folded into one of these other projects or we could look at it a different way. So we really were trying to focus the groups on saying these are the big things. And what I think is great is, you can walk into a process and say, okay, we need a new performing arts center. And you say, well, how do you know you need it? Well, everybody's talking about it, okay? We need a new field house. Well, some people think we need a new field house. Some people don't. Some people aren't sure what that looks like. This is your group, a representative group of your district saying, we're confirming this for you, right? A new performing arts center, a new field house. We believe in that idea of an addition to the middle school. And so we now have confirmation of these things and now can start to work towards saying, all right, let's unpack that a little bit more. What does that look like, right? From the performing arts group, I've got a 3-page document that tells me what they need, right? We've got a document that tells us of all the different things that they would like to see a new performing arts center house. A new field house is a little bit grayer. I think there are a lot of different concepts of what a new field house might entail. Is it just basketball courts? Does it have new turf area? Does it include a weight room? Does it replace locker rooms? What are the other impacts? That's the other thing that we talked about. New field house, does that mean what happens to the visitors' locker room area, right? Are we repurposing that? What new spaces might go into there if we've got new locker rooms in a new field house? So there are dominoes to this process, and that's where I need more time with your groups to be able to get there so that when I come to you in November, I can get it as flushed out as I think I can. So ultimately, great information. I felt like we got some really good feedback, and I felt like there was really good conversation during community advisory. So next steps, we
Question about that slide.
yes, please.
So we talk, thank you. We talk about the addition to the middle school and that's something that's, we've been kind of bouncing around in conversations, since I've been a board member. And so some of that feeling is based on the last 4 or 5 years where we were significantly overcrowded at the middle school, and now we're not overcrowded at the middle school, and we probably won't be overcrowded at the middle school for about 10 years. So, kind of how do we, and I would say the same probably applies to the campus circulation issue. with full-day kindergarten, and that's changed the way we circulated traffic there. So is that, and four-tier versus two-tier. So is that hitting this, is that really because something needs to happen, or is that because something that people perceive needs to happen because of what's happened in the last year and a half or 2 years there?
So let me tackle the second one first and the first one second. As far as Indian Trail and Winchester Trail are concerned, so those buildings were designed over 20 years ago, okay? And 20 years ago, we didn't have anywhere near the number of parents that are picking up and dropping off like we are now, right? Your busing has changed in that time frame. The number of parents pick up and drop off has changed. You've now added preschool and kindergarten requirements that weren't really there when the buildings were first considered. So I think it's really just a full traffic study and a relook at the circulation to see what improvements can be made. You guys have done, throughout the time that I've been working with you, and I go back to 2003, every couple of years there was a change to the campus, right? We're going to do this year. We're going to push people over this way, and then we're going to bring the buses in over here. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. That's happened multiple times. I think that it's just a comprehensive look, and it starts with a traffic impact study to say, okay, here's what's happening. Here's what's successful right now at Indian Trail, but that's not what Winchester Trail is doing. How do we, what are the things that we could do in order to improve that? So I think that's the start of that process. And so we put a dollar amount to all of these, but they really were ranges to say this could be as small of an impact as this, or as large of an impact as that, right? And so I think that's what we need to flush out a little bit further. To speak to the middle school, it was interesting to have a conversation about the middle school, not only from the prospect of academics and the desire to maybe have some flexible teaching space, which I think the staff feels like they don't have now, that they're in their pods, but there aren't really those places where we could take two groups of students, 50 kids into a space that we can open up. So similar to what the middle school addition allows, right? Where would there be spaces where we could do those kinds of things? So there was an academic component, but then there was also an athletic component where we've taken over a bunch of the spaces that were previously for PE. The locker rooms have felt small at that building, and if we are going to make improvements to the fields in order to bring sports back to the middle school, then we have an athletic component there plus storage. Boosters looked at it and said, you know what, we'd love to buy some things for middle school athletics, but we've got no place to store them. And so if we can't store them, they're just going to get damaged, so there's no point in making the investment. So I think that the addition at the middle school has a lot of layers to it. And it's not necessarily just to take on that perception of, we've had some big student load come through, and maybe that load's not going to be there in the next 10 years. I think it's also to provide flexibility and support on the athletic side or on the academic side, and then provide a lot of spaces that are necessary on the athletic side. And so in my mind, it's a two-story addition. It's got an academic component upstairs and an athletic component downstairs, and then there's just a lot of little things that have to be worked out to make that sort of real. So I think it's a great question, and it is definitely one that we tried to dig into a little bit, because Nick had shown us enrollment and said, hey, look, we have these big moves that came through the district, these big grades, and now we're not seeing that behind them. What does that mean, right? And so it means less kids maybe in each classroom, but it still doesn't get us to that kind of flexibility that I think the staff might be looking for. It's great questions.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other questions? Let's go to the last slide there. Yep, thank you. So a couple of things that we were very consistent in each of our groups, not only in our focus groups with the community advisory team. We want everybody to understand that this is an open and transparent process. So for instance, everything that we learned in the focus groups, we relayed back to steering team, right? The steering team has all of that information. We've tried to make sure that everybody understands that this is a process where we're asking for everybody's input. But ultimately, what it comes down to is we're going to develop options, right? That's what we talked about. And then we're going to, I think the next piece is to really review these specific solutions with some of our focus groups. We won't go back to all 20, but there may be sort of 5 or 6 groups that we say, hey, we need to double back with these folks and really get more information and start to, kind of work out some of the details of these things. I want to reconvene the community advisory team again. I think we had a lot of fun going through that exercise, but we need to kind of get into a little bit more detail next time. And then I hope to be bringing recommendations to you at the November board meeting. We've been very consistent with everybody to make sure that they understand that you guys have the final decision. That any recommendation that comes to you doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to tackle any of these options or all of these options or anything in between, right? This is really a process to try and get a lot of things that I think you as a district have been thinking about for a decade onto a page that you can really start to assess them. And so, again, I appreciate your time, and I think it's been a lot of fun. I hope that everybody's had a chance to be involved as enjoyed themselves.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate this process and how open and transparent it is, and also how inclusive it is. It is very important that everyone, all of our stakeholders, participate. And I just wanted to reiterate for the meeting that's coming up on October 23rd, we do want everyone to come out if they are able to. And this is just great. And it's nice to be able, from a board perspective, to get the feedback from all of our stakeholders, because it helps us be in alignment with what they want and help us make our decisions as we determine what our priorities are and what the needs are. And I really appreciate those categories, especially looking at how many students will be impacted and incorporating the future, the flexibility piece of it, and obviously the safety security. I think this is just a great process, and we appreciate you leading the way, and our building and our administrators also. So, thank you.
October 23rd, where?
It is at
Winchester Trail.
At Winchester Trail.
From 6 to 7, correct?
It is from 6 to 7.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Josh, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, in our presentation, we will hear from our athletic director, Mr. Jacob Ramsey.
Good evening. I'm going to pass copies of the proposal around for you guys to lay eyes on. I'd like to kind of talk you through. This is in regards to a recommendation to transition our current swim program that is considered a club into a chartered sport status. Very good. Perfect. I'll start off with the summary. This proposal recommends that we transition our swim program from a club status into an official chartered student activity program. Over the last 3 years, we've experienced quite a bit of growth in student interest in our swim program. I think in the next phase of this document, you can kind of identify in 2021, 2022, we started with 14 student athletes within the program. 22, 23, we rose to 19. Last year, we rose to 21. We're currently anticipating 28 student athletes participating in the program for the current 24-25 school year. In addition to recommending that we transition out of a club status and into a charter student activity status, we are asking for a supplemental contract for the staffing of that program. The two coaches who are also staff members within the district have done a great job getting that program off and running. And as they kind of look to transition out of coaching, we want to make sure that our student athletes are in good hands and in the program that has some life behind it after they transition out of coaching. In coming up with this proposal, we reached out to several of our colleagues within the OCC, specifically the Buckeye Division. On page 2, you'll be able to identify participation numbers for us here in Canal, as well as the Buckeye Division across the board. As you can tell, those numbers are very, very comparative. In reaching out to those athletic directors and those coaches, we identified the majority of those programs offer a supplemental contract for the sport of swimming. For us, within this recommendation, just so you guys know, our swim program currently operates out of Rockport Recreation Center. Under current and future financial structure, I kind of identify some of the logistical measures that will go into this year.
Our current situation is our swimmers currently pay a membership to access and practice at Groveport Rec. That membership costs currently $30 per swimmer. In addition to the $30 membership, monthly membership, our students are asked to pay a $75 team fee. Those team fees cover swim caps, team t-shirts, and the entry fees for each of our invitational events. If approved, we would continue on with this current structure for the 24-25 school year with the hopes of transitioning into what is our traditional structure for the rest of our sports, which means implementing a pay-to-participate fee of $150 per swimmer. With that pay-to-participate fee, we've kind of run the numbers, and that's on page 3. That will allow that program to be self-sufficient wholeheartedly. I think our minimum number for student athletes' interest in which it would be self-sufficient is currently 21 athletes, which we've had or we've been very close to. In addition to the pay to participate, we've had conversations with the staff and with our student athletes. They are interested in also getting into some fundraising opportunities, as well as potentially starting a booster club to help support their efforts. As a part of my recommendation, I've taken the time to identify where this supplemental contract would fit in our current structure for supplementals. And I think the appropriate place for that would be under Category C, Level 1, with the title of Varsity Swim Dive Coach. With our current anticipated numbers of student athletes, again, being 28, not only will we be able to cover our costs, but I think it puts us in a position to create somewhat of a surplus that could be reinvested into the program and improve the experience of those student athletes. Kind of wanted to give you guys some general information. Very open to some questions if you have them. Would love to field some questions.
When does the swim season start?
It will officially start, I believe, 2 weeks on Thursday is when their first official practice could be able to start.
And the thoughts with this proposal, just on a timeline, would be presenting it to you tonight, and then we would have it for approval at the November board meeting, if that's something gives you time to process. And
I just want to be clear on pay to participate. They wouldn't implement a swimming pay to participate fee. The fee's already there, so it would have to go in effect 24-25. It's in the athletic handbook that if you participate in a sporting event, you pay the fee. So it's no implementation of a fee. The fee's already there. So if they go to a chartered sport, then they would be required to pay that fee. I just want to make sure you're clear and the board is clear on that piece of it. And it just gets put in the athletic fund as a revenue, and then he's got the ability to budget out to swimming. It wouldn't be necessarily this is their money and this is their budget per se. And the cost of the supplemental would be on the general fund to the Board of Education, just so we're clear on those things. All the other costs would be athletic fund related.
All right, very good. Thank you. Next up, we will hear from CWEA.
Hello. I'm here to give a snapshot of what's happening across the Canal Winchester classrooms. At Indian Trail, second graders in Melissa Hazelbaker's classroom have been busy doing lots of reading groups at enrichment and intervention time, while also playing games in phonics. They've been making their learning personal by using self-to-text connections for their English language arts block. When not focused on ELA-based content, they've been tending to their monarch chrysalists in the classroom and then releasing them. Lastly, they have been using current events found in Scholastic News to help learn about science and social studies. Over at Winchester Trail, Mrs. Riddle's third grade class recently wrote letters and cards for the Vietnam veterans participating in the honor flight this past October 10th. Her stepfather rode on his first honor flight along with some of his Navy buddies. The class discussed what the honor flight is and what it meant to be a Vietnam veteran, and they tied this into their discussion of American landmarks and memorials as their story from Wonders that week focused on American landmarks. In Mrs. Giffin's fifth grade class, and I hope I pronounced her name right, I'm sorry if I didn't, they are engaged in a variety of focused learning activities. Her English language arts class has been concentrating on historical fiction, teaching students to analyze and understand key elements of the genre. They have also been deepening their understanding of figurative language and improving their ability to summarize texts effectively. Additionally, students are being introduced to the race writing strategy, which means restate, answer, cite, and explain, which helps them organize their responses to open-ended questions with clear, evidence-based answers. Mrs. Giffin's social studies class has been working on geography with an emphasis on learning all 50 states. They are going to be concluding their geography unit with the MAP project. In this creative assignment, students will design their own world and produce a detailed map of the world, applying the geographical concepts that they have learned in class. This interdisciplinary approach encourages both creativity and critical thinking while building foundational skills in writing, teamwork, and social studies. Over to the middle school, the 7th graders will soon be hosting their annual Greek Fest this Friday, October 18th. This will be the fest event in 7th grade where students will dress up, eat Greek food, perform Greek myths that they wrote, and participate in modified Greek Olympic events. You all should attend. In preparation for this event, students in Mrs. Burns' 7th grade ELA class have begun writing their own Greek myths to be performed during the 7th grade Greek Fest Day. Their Greek myths will include all of the cover topics discussed in class up until this point: characters, conflict, setting, plot, story devices, etc. The myths will be recorded and shared on Greek Fest Day. The students will have the opportunity to vote on their favorite myth. The winning myth will be announced at the end of the day on October 8th. This is a memorable event where students can celebrate the end of their Greek unit. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Any question, comments? Thank you.
That was Paula Miller, by the way, Indian Trail teacher.
Next, this is the part of our meeting where we welcome to hear from public speakers. Do we have any public voice?
We do not.
All right, thank you. We will move into executive reports, and our treasurer's report is up first. Mr. Roberts?
Good evening. I'll be brief. I'm going to be talking a little bit more on insurance rates here shortly ahead. We are 25% through the year. We are trending right on target with all of our expenditures, which is the most important thing of trying to stay under budgets. You'll see personnel and benefits are under the 25%, but that will soon rise as we get through the year with the salary adjustments. Purchase services are down almost 4%. There's some key things to that with we didn't bring back a couple things from last year. There are things that are up significantly. Electric is up. South Central Power had increased our rates pretty substantially. And then special education continues to be an increase through tuition, transportation, and those types of things. So kind of offsetting some of the things we lost. I would expect that number to get closer to what we've budgeted at 6.7 as we go throughout the year. Supplies, we talk about this every year. We're always front-loaded buying supplies. Chromebooks eat up a big percentage of that in the very beginning of the year. I still feel comfortable with the 2.6 million. We do have some transfers that are still yet to come, waiting to know more as we go through with bleacher projects and paving projects and different things before I bring a recommendation to transfer money from the general fund to the permanent improvement, waiting to get through kind of this master planning stage also. Revenues, we're still waiting on state. We're expecting that to update here in October. Some key things on that is the base cost continues to be, so we're in the second year of the biennium. We're going to make a push for the base cost to change again. If the base cost does not change, then we will continue to see a decrease in what we receive state funding. So local share, the factors that go into that are always up to date. Real estate tax, income tax, so as that increases for us and the base cost stays the same and enrollment stays stable, it's kind of a disaster for us in the formula. So getting the base cost up to where it should be and allowing, promoter emphasizing to the state that that's very important in the formula, or a lot of districts will fall to the guarantee and the formula at that point would be worthless. There's teams of treasurers, superintendents, advocates that are already fighting and making sure the Formula 1 stays in place and some factors get changed within the formula to fully fund the public sector. Other than that, that's all I have on general fund tonight. Interest levels, we talk about it monthly. Those are still very good. We're making a push to kind of get things in the 3 to 5 window. We had an interest cut by the Fed here in August. We're going to expect at least 1 or 2 more, so those rates will gradually come down in the next year or two. So we're trying to position ourselves in that 4.5 to 5.5 range to make sure we've got some revenue ahead of times when interest rates are much lower. So, any questions on the general fund financial report? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Moving on to our superintendent's report, we will hear from Mrs. Hunt.
Thank you. I'm going to start off with our Knocked Your Socks Off award for this year. It's our first month of being able to recognize our staff members who have knocked our socks off. We have 2 that we're going to recognize tonight. Both of them were unable to be with us, so I'm going to just share why they got nominated. First off, we're going to start with our school psychologist, Kelly Boyden, and Kelly was nominated by her colleague, Rachel Law. Rachel says, Kelly has gone above and beyond for the staff and students at Indian Trail while she fills in with school psychologist duties. She is advocating for the students and getting them on the right path to get the help they need. She has been a huge help, and I want her to know that her work is very much appreciated. So congratulations to Kelly Boyden. Next, we have paraprofessional Patty Wagner, and Patty was nominated by her colleague, Amy Cruz. Ms. Cruz says that Miss Patty makes Canal Winchester High School a wonderful place to work. She's always helping students, those on her caseload, as well as many other students in her class. I find myself repeatedly reaching out to her to help with my organization. She's an expert. I love co-teaching with her. It's like having an extra set of hands. She consistently brings a positive attitude and keeps it real with all students in the room. Miss Patty has a unique connection with all the students in our classes that makes her an irreplaceable addition to our staff. So congratulations to Patty and to Kelly, and I will be delivering them their socks later this week. Next, I just have a few things to share about. The first would be that we were honored to host State Senator Michelle Reynolds on September 30th for a press conference announcing a new school safety bill at Canal Winchester High School. The bill would provide funding to equip all school staff in Ohio with a silent panic alert system that instantly notifies local emergency responders and triggers a campus-wide lockdown during emergencies. Our Director of Student Services, Mr. Max Lolithan, also spoke during the press conference to share our commitment to school safety and appreciation for the proactive approach to school safety. Next up, we'd like to congratulate the Canal Winchester Marching Band on hosting another successful Ohio Music Educators Association marching band competition, the Winchester Classic, on Saturday, October 11th. More than 1,000 students representing 11 schools from all over the state of Ohio met at Mitlock Stadium to perform. At this event, the Canal Winchester Marching Band earned the top rating of superior, qualifying them to participate in OMEA State Marching Band Finals. Their state finals performance will be on October 27th at Piqua High School, and we wish them the best of luck at state. You can also catch our marching band at the Circleville Pumpkin Show this Wednesday in the Parade of Bands. Prior to tonight's board meeting, we had a ceremony to unveil our memorial patio. This space was a tribute to the Canal Winchester students and staff that have passed during their time while at Canal Winchester schools. The memorial patio will serve as a lasting reminder of the students' and staff's impact on our community, their contributions, and the legacy that they have left behind. I would like to thank Eagle Scout Ty Gruery, who raised funds and completed the patio for us. The memorial patio is located on the side of the auxiliary gym located behind the Education Center, and we hope that it provides a place of peace, reflection, and inspiration to families, friends, and the entire Canal Winchester community. Tomorrow, October 15th, our annual survey opens for community input. The 2024 Canal Winchester Schools, Your Voice survey will be open at noon tomorrow, and it can be assessed on our website, social media pages, and Parent Square. We encourage all of our families, residents, students, and staff to take a few minutes to help shape the future of Canal Winchester schools. This year's survey includes questions about safety, teaching and learning, our facilities, and our career and college programming. And last but certainly not least, this was already talked about tonight, but just to give a little bit more reminder that all community members are invited to join us for a community meeting at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, October 23rd at Winchester Trail Elementary to join our facilities master planning process. This will be an opportunity for all interested community members to learn more about the facilities planning process and share thoughts and ideas to help shape our plan. We've gotten great input, as you heard tonight, from our focus groups and our community advisory team, and we look forward to getting even more people involved in the conversation on October 23rd. So again, Wednesday, October 23rd, Winchester Trail, 6 p.m. All are welcome. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Hunt. Are there any questions or comments for our superintendent? Hearing none, we will move into, and congratulations, by the way, to our Knock Your Socks Off recipients and our marching band. And just want to also send my thanks out to the Eagle Scout who made this memorial happen. So thank you. We will hear from our board committee reports. First up is CWJRD.
Just to go off of the earlier presentation from Josh Predovich from SHP. He came to the CWJRD meeting last month and presented to us and asked questions, and it was a good meeting. We appreciate him spending some time with us. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Twist. Reporting from the Legislative Liaison Committee. My report overlapped with our superintendent. I was just going to mention that we welcomed State Senator Michelle Reynolds to our schools, and also Lori Aldahef, who was the founder of Make Our Schools Safe, and she's the mother of Alyssa Aldahef, who tragically passed away in the Florida's Parkland school shooting. I just wanted to mention it's under Alyssa's law, which is currently Senate Bill 313. And the law has already passed in 7 states. We're pushing for this to be passed in Ohio, and then if so, Ohio will become the 8th state. Also, I wanted to just remind folks that early voting has already begun as of October 8th, and please remember to cast your vote in this upcoming general election. This underscores some of our key aspects of our portrait of a graduate, and being responsible, respectful citizens, collaboration, communication, all of that. So I just want to be mindful that we all demonstrate this and be an example for our school community. Make sure you vote. In addition to that, I wanted to give a special shout out to the 9 Canal Winchester High School students who participated in Youth at the Booth poll worker training, and they will be serving on Election Day working the polls. So I just wanted to give them a special shout out. We appreciate that. And that's all that I have for my report. Next, we will hear from Ms. Green from Student Achievement Liaison.
Thank you, Mrs. Talley. Not much to report, just wanted to recognize that today is Indigenous Peoples Day, celebrated to honor the cultures and histories of the Native American people. The day is centered around reflecting on their tribal roots and the tragic stories that hurt but strengthen their communities. So I just wanted to recognize that. And most of the board members will be attending the OSBA Capitol Conference November 10th through the 12th. So we look forward to reporting from what we hear from around the state on that day.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Next up in our agenda, there's district reports. Are there any comments, questions regarding our district reports coming from the board?
Yeah, I've got a few things. First of all, I wanted to welcome Mayor Steger to the meeting tonight, so thank you for attending. I wanted to commend CW Middle School. Teacher of the Month for September was Mike Stuckey, so I want to say congratulations to him. Athletically, our girls soccer program, 6-0-1 in the OCC and OCC champs, so congratulations to them. And Coach Sullivan and his staff. We had a couple golfers. I thought this was interesting. 2025 Scotland Junior Golf Invitational, and they will be traveling overseas to be playing. Haley Boss and Anna McNamara? Sorry, Anna. But they will be traveling over to Scotland to be playing several courses, which I thought was really, really neat. And then also, I thought this was interesting and maybe would be useful for our parents that are watching or listening. Families out in Fairfield County, the Triple P program, the Positive Parenting Program. It's a free 7-week course on parenting. And then parents in Franklin County through Nationwide Children's Hospital is also offering the Triple P for caregivers of children ages 0 to 12 who have disabilities or developmental delays. So I thought it was important to highlight those two things also. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda items for discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
I apologize, you were quick on that. We were just talking about wanting to chaperone the golfers on their trip to Scotland. All right, we're going to start first with the minutes from the September 9th regular meeting. Number 3, we have donations. We do have 4 donations. Just want to highlight, class of 1974 is donating to Indian Trail Library. We have an anonymous donation to the high school athletics. Mike Dillon from OH Grad is donating to the high school for Fuel Up Fridays, and Matthew and Simone Rain are donating to Indian Trail for the Nutcracker trip. So thank you to those individuals for their donations. Number 4, certified personnel. We do have a leave of absence request. Number 5, our classified personnel. We have a resignation for the purpose of retirement from Debbie Moneybreak, effective December 31st. And we just want to thank Debbie for her many years of service to Canal Winchester Schools. We have a recommendation for Fatima Bradley as bus driver. And we have recommendations for 4 bus aides and a custodian substitute. So sub-bus aides and sub-custodian. Number 6 is our supplemental personnel. The majority here are our winter sports positions and theater positions. And we are rescinding a contract for an assistant girls basketball coach.
Are there any questions, comments? If not, Mr. Roberts?
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mrs. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next, I move to approve payment in lieu of transportation applicants based on the terms of the 2024-2025 payment in lieu of transportation resolution as presented. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
And this is routine, you'll see these monthly, so.
All right. Mr. Roberts?
Mrs. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Motion carries. We also have a second action item, insurance rates, and I move to hear the recommended insurance rates as presented. And is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Green? Thank you. Mr. Roberts?
Okay, I'm gonna throw out a lot of numbers to you, so I'm trying to make this as layman as I can. So claims dictate our funding rates. We're self-funded. So as claims go higher, we've got to set funding rates to offset the rising claims. Health insurance, we're going to increase 7.1%. CBIZ, who are a consultant, they do a insurance actuary review. They recommended us raise the rates 9.23%. Effective January 1, we're switching from Medical Mutual to a UHC Surest plan. So they recommended us on that rate of 9.23% increase. Had we stayed with MMO, our increase would have been recommended to be 16.12%. And the reason why is they take the last 2 years of your claims data, so up till September 30th of this past year. So if you take a rolling 12 months, from 2022 to 2023, we went from 6.2 million to 7.2 million, a 15% increase. From September 23 to September 24, we went from 7.1 to almost 8.7 million, a 21% increase. Over the last 2 years of our claims data of what they use to provide and give you rates, it's been the highest that we have seen. And case in point is why we wanted to switch the plans to get to a different plan to try to stop that trend. So the writing was on the wall. So you got your claims, you got your fixed cost, they throw it all together and you need $9.1 million, for example, in the Surest plan to break even. A lot of different factors go into it. We're somewhat rolling the dice to go with 7.1%. For example, through the first 3 months, the last 3 years, we've averaged 1.7 million in claims. We're at 2.5 million this year through 3 months of the fiscal year. So we've already lost over $600,000 in the cash balance, where we started at 2.7. We're at just below 2.1 million. Obviously, we're not expecting, we'd have a much higher increase than 7.1 if we were to expect that trend to continue. And if that trend does continue, then we probably will lose close to $1 million. But I don't expect it to. When we switch January 1, we will have runoff claims from our Medical Mutual plan up until about March, and then we'll still see some runoff claims, but it'll be much lower and lower and lower. On the Surest plan, January 1, those claims won't kick in until probably March to mid-March. So you'll start starting off trickle. So we should have a March, April, May to where we have our claims reduced slightly just because of the transitioning of plans. So either way, we should catch a break later in the period. And plus, Surest is calculating that the claims, had they been run through them, would have been 11% less. So our claims, which were averaging 750,000 per month, will reduce by about 11%. Right now, they're averaging about 803,000 per month, which is about 53,000 above normal trend average over the last 24 months. So as we get that monthly claims down, we should come back to normal, and the 7.1% should be sufficient. I tried to project out till next year and then the year after to try to say, okay, what's going to happen in the future of this plan, and it should stabilize off to where we should see lower increases. We were not gonna see that in the medical mutual plan. This is the third year in a row we've had claims of 800,000 plus on increases. We went from 6.5 to 7.3 to 8.1, and now we're approaching 8.9. So that was a trend that just wasn't going to stop. So that's why we wanted to switch. That's why we needed to switch, to hopefully maintain and stop the trend that was happening in medical mutual. Since 2016, our total costs were 4.2. By next year, that cost will have doubled. So health insurance, with everything else in the world, inflation has impacted it. I don't see a stop to it. So it's going to be very important for us to properly manage and maintain this plan. Maybe even add an option at some point later for people that can't afford the $2,820 in a family. Maybe bring in a plan that's much less valued, but it's affordable. That way they have at least got insurance. Right now we've got 130 plus employees that opt out of our insurance. That's a large percentage. There's various reasons, but I think probably the number one reason is accustomed to the cost of the plan. On a monthly basis, what that means to an employee, if you have single across the board, it's $13.20 per month. So $6.50 per pay if you have every single option. For a family, it's $50 a month, $25 a pay, with the health and the dental and vision stayed the same. The dental looks scary with the 14.3%, but when that's a small number, the percentage is going to be much higher. We have not increased that rate since calendar year 2020. So from 19 to 20, we went from $40 to $42, and then 80 to 84. So this is the first time we've changed dental since 2020. So we've maintained 0% for 4 years. It's not what I wanted, but it's where I kind of expected it once I started looking at the claims data and knowing how they calculate our rates. Just the last 12 months have been really, really bad. For example, Mr. Watson and I looked today, we hadn't had any claim months over $800,000 in the history of the school district. 7 of the last 10 have been over 800,000. So it's a combination, and what's even scarier than that, usually you would think we'd have high claimants. We have one high claimant that have exceeded the stop loss of 150,000 with only 2 that have exceeded the halfway point. Typically you see that high of claims, you see 4 or 5 people that have exceeded the $150,000 stop loss. On the last 5 years, we've averaged 7 people that have exceeded the 150,000. So we've got probably 5 to 6 more to go that's not even on our radar at this point, with already being 500,000 above where we had been on trend over the last 3 years through the first 3 months. So I feel good about the 7.1%, but we need some things to go right. I think the plan change helps us with that. And otherwise, I mean, claims are driving our costs. Any questions on the insurance rates? These will be effective January 1st. And they go through December 31st of 2025.
I'm just reiterating, according to the terms of the negotiated agreement, this is in alignment with that, correct?
We had said we would expect this to be 9% less than what the current plan would be. And that is below that, and that's why I wanted to take it from the 9.2 to the 7.1 to align with what we had said during negotiations. With the MMO plan being recommended to increase 16.1%, that would have been a 7% difference. We're rolling the dice essentially with about $190,000 that we're not collecting in an annual period. 1%'s worth about $95,000 to the funding. So yes, it is. It's in alignment with what we said during negotiations, and I would expect this plan to play out much better than the medical mutual plan. Like I've got projections for next year where we might see 2% increase instead of a 10% claims increase. Like the last 2 years, we've had 15% and 21%. And that trend was going to continue with Medical Mutual. It has to do with cost. When you start looking at the claims data, it doesn't take much to hit $10,000. I mean, it can almost be anything, and it's a $10,000 claim. It doesn't even have to be a substantial surgery. It doesn't have to be pregnancy or anything like that. Matter of fact, pregnancy, which used to be one of the most expensive claims, was one of the cheapest on the list that I was scrolling today. It was almost like, wow, okay, this used to be one of your high dollar costs, and now it's a low dollar cost.
So your expectation is, I know given claim history and things like that, you don't expect to have to revisit like another increase for 2026? Or do
We're
you?
always going to have increases. National trend is 12% for inflation and customary expenses. So you're going to have a point to where you have to keep up with, if a surgery costs $10,000 this year, in 2 years it's going to cost $15,000.
Yeah,
That's just
I
kind of,
understand, but like from year to year, because I know you said that history from the previous 2 years, right, of the claim history was taken into account with the figures that we're looking at now.
Mhm.
So I didn't know if this would be stagnant for a year, and then we look at another 2 years and then make recommendations.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That
So,
kind of thing.
yeah, so the 8.6 million, that was weighted at 80%. So next year, if we happen to come in at 7.8 million, that's weighted at 80%, and the 8.6 gets to 20%. So yes, as we go through and we have lower claims, the calculation becomes different.
Okay, thank
Like last year, I think we were, 3% increase? Really, we've averaged about 3%, 4% over the last 5 years on claims or on premium increases.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions or concerns? All right, thank you, Mr. Roberts.
You're welcome.
Next, we will enter into our discussion items, which we have the first reading of the 2025-20. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That's correct. Mr. Roberts, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Talley?
Yes.
Mrs. Green?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Motion has carried. And we will now have the first reading of the 2025-2026 calendar. Up for discussion?
Yes. So a committee of union representatives and administrators met to discuss and put together a few drafts of the calendar for the 25-26 school year. And this is the calendar that came out on top. So just going through and highlighting the calendar here would start for new staff would start August 4th. They would be here for the 4th, 5th, 6th. August 7th would be the first day for all staff, 7th, 8th, 11th, and then the 12th would be the first day for students. If you notice throughout the calendar, for the most part, breaks are built in to each month. So your red dates that you see throughout the calendar are no school days, and those would be built in for both staff and students. The yellow are for generally staff comes to work for professional development days, and the students would not be at school. So this calendar does take us through May 29th, which would be the last staff day, and May 28th, which would be the last student day. And spring break would be the week of the 16th through the 20th, and then you notice April 3rd through 6th reflect Good Friday and Easter Sunday with those breaks as well.
Can you
So-
scroll back down? Thanks.
Yeah, 2 weeks at Christmas, or the holidays, for a holiday break. November as well, you get three days there. And then you just look, October 9th, 10th would be our fall break, which is very similar to what we had last week. So that's the calendar. Typically, we do a first reading, and then if there's any feedback provided, we take the feedback over the next month, and then we would bring it to you for approval at the November meeting.
And just to also confirm, this calendar was the one that the majority of the calendar committee voted for, correct?
Yes. So one of the things that has happened in the past is the union has prepared the calendar. We went through negotiations and asked to have some administrative voice on there as well. So the union does put out a survey to their members to ask, what do you want, right? Would you rather start early? Would you rather get out early? Would you rather have a lot of breaks throughout the year? And of course, all those came back really high. Like, we want to start late, we want to get out early, and we'd like to have a lot of breaks, which you're working with a certain number of days, you can't have it all. And so we put two calendars together, or two calendars out for vote, and the two calendars both had the start date of what you see here, the August 4th for new teachers, and then August 12th for students. And we did receive feedback through the process that people wanted to see a later start. So what we did is we wrote out the first two, which one was pretty much limited breaks throughout the year, get out earlier, and whatever calendar won, this calendar here. Then we took another calendar and had it start a week later and had it end a week later. And this one won pretty significantly with the numbers. So yes, this would be the calendar that was voted with the majority vote.
Okay, that helps provide context.
Yes.
When did we start this year?
We started this year, the first day with students was the 18th. So it was a week later than what you would see here. That was, a lot of that was due to the Indian Trail edition.
Right.
We were pushing it back to make sure that we gave ourselves enough time to be ready.
Okay.
Any discussion from the board? I mean, I'm fine with the calendar as presented.
If there is any feedback from those listening or watching, you can feel free to reach out and provide that feedback to us, and we'll take it.
Thank you very
Thank you.
There is a need for executive session, so I move to enter into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. There will not be any decisions made, and we will reconvene in an open session only for purposes of adjournment. So this concludes our meeting, and we do need to have a vote on the executive session. So, Mr. Roberts?
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes. Motion carries, and the meeting is adjourned for now. We will take a short recess before we enter into executive session, but we thank you all for coming, and you have a great evening.